Now let's take a look at news stories making headlines around the globe. First off, the Senate has announced that it will hold an emergency plenary sitting on Tuesday, February 10, 2026. The announcement was made on Sunday in a statement signed by the clerk of the Senate, Emmanuel Odo, who said all senators have been requested to attend. The session, which is scheduled to commence at 12 noon, is coming days after the Senate passed the amendment bill on February 4. The Senate shut down Clause 60 and Subsection 3, which would have mandated presiding officers to electronically transmit results from polling units directly to INEC result viewing portal in real time. Meanwhile, the Nigeria Labour Congress has warned of potential nationwide protests and election boycotts over what it describes as confusion and contradictory positions by the Senate on amendments of the 2022 Electoral Act. The Labour Union accuses the Senate of undermining public confidence in Nigeria's electoral process by failing to clearly state whether electronic transmission of results will be mandatory. The NLC says it is concerned that the Senate is planning to undermine the country's fledgling democracy. According to the NLC, the lack of clarity surrounding the Senate's decision threatens electoral integrity and public trust. It submits that Nigerians deserve a transparent system where votes are not only counted, but must count. President Bola Tinubu has met with the commander of the United States Africa Command, General Dagvin Anderson, at the State House in Abuja. The meeting, attended by Nigeria's National Security Advisor, Nuhu Ribadu, the country's service chiefs, Minister of Defense, and heads of the DSS and NIA, was disclosed by a presidential aide on social media, Segun Dada. Also in attendance were members of the U.S. Africa Command delegation and the Charge d'Affaires of the United States Embassy in Nigeria, Keith Heffen. General Anderson leads U.S. Africa Command, which oversees American military operations and partnerships across the continent. Meanwhile, the British royal family has announced that President Bola Tinubu will pay a state visit to the United Kingdom next month. In a post on its official X account on Sunday, the royal family says President Tinubu, accompanied by First Lady Oluremi Tinubu, will visit the UK from the 18th to the 19th of March 2026, following an invitation from King Charles III. King Charles III and Queen Camilla are expected to host the Nigerian leader at Windsor Castle. Nigeria's presidential spokesman on information and strategy, Bayo Ononuga, also confirmed the visit in a post on X, describing it as the first state visit by a Nigerian leader to the UK in 37 years. Moving on, the indigenous people of Biafra, IPOB, has announced the immediate and permanent termination of the Monday sit-at-home across the southeast, bringing to an end a protest that has disrupted social and economic life in the region for nearly 5 years. In a statement issued on Sunday, IPOB spokesperson Ima Powerful said the directive was issued by the group's detained leader, Nnamdi Kano, who urged residents to resume normal activities, reopen markets, and return children to school without fear. According to the statement, Kano said there is no longer any justification for the sit-at-home, stressing the need for the full restoration of normal life across the region. IPOB warned that any individual or group attempting to enforce the sit-at-home going forward would be acting contrary to Kano's directive, declaring that the era of Monday sit-at-home is over. Residents were urged to remain law-abiding and vigilant. The Monday sit-at-home was introduced in 2021 following Kano's arrest and continued detention after his extradition from Kenya to Nigeria to face terrorism-related charges. Now to Kano. No fewer than 30 people were reportedly dead in a fatal accident involving a trailer at Kwanabade in Gezawa local government area of Kano State. The trailer was said to be heading towards Gujungu in Jigawa State, allegedly crashed due to reckless driving, leading to the death of over 30 persons, while many others sustained various degrees of injuries. The Federal Road Safety Corps, FRSC, in a statement by spokesperson Abdullahi Labarand, blamed the accident on excessive speeding that led to loss of control. Reacting to the unfortunate incident, the Kano State Governor Abba Yusuf expressed deep sympathy and condolences to the families of the deceased. In a statement signed by the Director of Media and Publicity Government House, Sunusi Bature Dawan Kintofa, the governor described the incident as heartbreaking and a great loss, not only to the affected families, but to the entire people of Kano State. He directed the Kano State Ministry of Health to ensure that all the victims received free and adequate medical care without delay. He further directed the Office of the Special Advisor on Humanitarian Affairs to immediately assess the casualties and come up with measures to support the families of the victims. Oh gosh, such tragedy. May their souls rest in peace, and most importantly, may we avoid or prevent such disasters from happening on our roads again. But before this morning, we have a number of stories to get us through. The Electoral Amendment Bill of 2026 still very much in the eye of the storm and on our table. And of course, stories across the different parts as I've read out this morning. Your take on these stories?
Okay, I think I'll dwell mostly on the election bill because that's the future of Nigerians. And I'm going to dispel a lot of lies, because I see people are selectively lying. It has gotten to a point where a lot of people are lying. Lie number one, they tell, Nigeria do not have adequate network in all parts of the country to ensure election transmission of results. A big lie. In the last election, INEC recorded about 95% full-on transmission. In fact, that was the presidential because of the case of the technical glitch, which INEC has not been able to tell us why. But also, you had higher percentages, even more than the 95%, in cases around the elections of the State House of Assembly and the House of Assembly election, the parliamentary elections. In 2022 Osun by-election, you had 98 to 100% transmission as at the night of the election. So the first lie a lot of people come to tell you that, oh, we don't have enough network, is a lie. Second lie, the people that come to make the argument that we don't have enough network to transfer, they don't even know the size of the sheets where you transfer. The election sheet, the picture of the election sheet you transfer. The election sheet is between 700 to 800 kilobytes, not even up to 1 megabyte. And that can easily be transferred. Another lie they tell is, how many countries do electronic real-time transmission? It's another big lie. There are many countries that do it. There's Kenya, that did it successfully in the last election. There is Brazil, which is almost our size in terms of democracy and even have more voters. You have countries like India, which is one of the largest democracy, if not the largest democracy in the world. They have electronic transmission. Countries called the Philippines. So this other argument they make, how many countries? There's another lie they spew. Do America even do electronic transmission real time? The reason why America doesn't do it, because America operates full federalism. Local governments do their election precinct by precinct. You get results from there. But those results are also released to different sources in almost like a real-time manner. That's why you see America can have exit polls. Thirdly, what are the arguments? Because a lot of people don't even understand the arguments. The argument is that we want to make this process justiciable. That's the argument. Currently, it's not justiciable. You can't take the result from IREF. And that was what happened in the Peter Obi case that they filed. Because they went to get the result from IREF, thinking they can file it in court. Courts then said, no, it's not justiciable. That the best you can do is to use it as corroborative evidence, but it's not the hard evidence. Why are we calling for the mandatory result? We are saying because we want the hard evidence to be taken from IREF to be presented in court to defend your case when you see there's election manipulation. Another lie they tell, oh, in the last election, one of the reasons why Peter Obi didn't do well is that he didn't have enough polling agents. If he had enough polling agents in 176,000 polling units, they will be able to give him all the election sheet to defend his election. It's a lie. There is no political party I have based on empirical data, that had close to 20,000 or 40,000 result EC8A sheets of all the polling units across the country. Where are you going to get the scale from? I say to them with empirical certainty, if they had it, they should come out. In their data room, the people they put on the field, under election conditions, you will get over 176,000 sheets. It's not possible now in a country where you have multiple polling agents work for multiple political parties under election condition. So let's stop deceiving ourselves. So that scale is almost impossible. So when they say that, and that's why we are calling for the use of the IREV to be the general scale that everybody can have access to. If you feel disgruntled, you can also go and pick your data from there and be able to prove. That's what we are talking about. So that's why we are saying this matter is pertinent. And the Senate, with due respect, a lot of people that make very daft arguments. This argument of no network was the same argument you made in 2023, guys. I mean, think of something new. You are not challenging us intellectually. I mean, we feel scared that it's this quality of senators that are there, that are making the same argument they made in 2023 that is not holding. It's not landing. Think of the more, cerebral. I mean, if you had even talked about the technical glitch role of hackers, or you try to get one or two hackers to try to see if the system is fail-proof and all of that, I mean, you bring the empirical data, we can even look at it. But think of something. This argument of no network or country, it's not landing as an argument. So these are the issues this morning. And these are the arguments we are trying to make so that they can make it justiciable, so that you can have scale. Countries that did this successfully, I mean, to a large extent, it reduced the tension in Kenya in the last election. We could all follow the tally as it was going on. And it's been used in many off-cycle elections. But this attempt not to pass it and all of these arguments, then it's not going to hold water. The Senate is going to hold an emergency sitting. Please, other senators, please go after them and let us ensure that this is mandatory. These guys should not run away, because this was the exact thing. And you know what happened? Before they could finally pass it, they saw this lacuna. That's why they passed it the last time, because they know they were going to meander it. Because I know they've been calling their consultants and telling them, how are we going to meander the law? That's what they do. They do it every time. We know the details. We know the consultants they talk to. So let's be careful. Ayo, please, what's the second story?
The sit-at-home order.
As regards the sit-at-home order, why are we deceiving ourselves? Kano has always said he didn't support the sit-at-home order. He said it through a message from our lawyer Jimako in 2024. He said it many times in court. That he's got no hand to do with it. That it is always this nefarious element that try to bring down the people with this sit-at-home order. So he said it multiple times. My commiserations to the lives lost in, I think, Kano, and good one for President Tinubu. First time in 37 years, state visit, and on all of that.
We'll talk about that in detail.
Yeah, we'll talk about that in details. I yield the floor.
Okay, the first subject, in my view, the National Assembly has been on recess for 2 weeks. And now the chairman of the National Assembly has called them back to meet tomorrow. By noon tomorrow, to follow what they call votes and proceedings, which is basically a process for the endorsement of the position of the Senate. So it's just procedural. Before you now have the harmonization conference committee of the entire National Assembly, namely the meeting between the Senate and the House of Reps to harmonize their position. It is also important to note that the Senate President, Chairman of the National Assembly, said over the weekend that the National Assembly will not be intimidated. And he made a point, also corroborated by the Chairman of the Independent National Electoral Commission, that electronic transmission has not been removed from the deal. However, what has been done is to remove the idea of real time and to say that, look, electronic transmission will be done at the polling unit level, at the ward level, at the state level, at the national level, but not real time. Okay, the argument that in 2023 that there could be a problem with transmission infrastructure, electricity, and all that. Well, there is a research that has been done by the opposition parties that in fact show that 93% transmission to IREV in 2023 worked. It only did not work during the presidential election. We still treated this subject yesterday with one of the stakeholders on This Day Live, the Sunday talk show. And that why are they now saying that it will not work this time around? People live in rural areas. They do electronic transfer. You transfer money to them, it works. Yes. So why will transfer real time of election results not work? However, the position of the Senate is that, look, there could be issues, post-election issues, creating a lot of litigation, a lot of doubts, particularly about remote communities. In fact, the chairman of the National Assembly was very specific. He said in 9 states of the Federation, there could be issues, and that would lead to chaos after the election. So now that they are coming back tomorrow from recess, they are trying to show the urgency of the matter. Secondly, I make the point that it's just procedural. So those who expect any major reversal may be disappointed. But a counterpoint to that is that civil society leaders, from Femi Falana to Professor Patu Tomi to former Minister Obi Ezekwesili, to Wale Okuniyi, Comrade Shehu Sani, and others, have said, no, this cannot work. Civil society groups are saying, what we want is real-time transmission of results, including the NBA, including the Nigerian Labour Congress. In fact, the Nigerian Labour Congress, led by Joe Ajero, is threatening that there will be protests before, during, and after the election. So the only thing we can say is that the National Assembly should not just say nobody can intimidate us. It is important to listen to these people, because the basic thing that Nigerians are asking for is free, fair, and credible elections. They just had an election in Japan, a snap election called by Sane Takaishi, the first female prime minister of Japan. The election was yesterday. By end of yesterday, we already knew the winner was. Takaishi winning with 65%. Our party, the Liberal Democratic Party, taking 68%. The best result, that the Liberal Democratic Party or any other party in that country has recorded. In Thailand, they also had the election. These February elections that Adifemi Akintoye reminded us of. And we already know how that 3-way process in Thailand is going. It's not a rocket science. Nigeria can do it. So, and Nigerians have the right to say, for transparency, for credibility, if we need to upgrade infrastructure, there's still enough time, we should upgrade it. That is the position of the people. So those are the two sides of the argument. You can balance them out depending on your political orientation. Now, as for Anambra, yes, IPOB yesterday issued a statement and said, well, our position has always been there should be no seat at home. That message that they have been putting out there, as they say, was never ever driven home until we had the courage of the sitting governor, that's Professor Chukwuma Charles Soludo, who summoned the courage to say this has to stop for economic reasons. He, being a professor of economics, does not see the sense why Anambra State alone will be losing over 8 billion naira every Monday, and the whole of the Southeast will be losing a total of 19 billion naira every Monday. And then he summoned the courage and said, look, I will shut down Onitsha main market. And he did, for a week. And that if Onitsha main market traders still continue to stay at home, listening to vagabonds, well, that's not the appropriate word, but listening to, people who are trying to sabotage the state, saboteurs will be a more appropriate adjective, that he will in fact shut down that entire market and rebuild it, and in fact revoke the allocation of the market stalls. Last Monday, everybody showed up in the market. Everybody. People, civil servants went to work and all of that. So, and I made a point when that happened, last Monday, I think, that it takes leadership. So what is the catalyst here is the courage, the leadership, the wisdom of the governor. And this morning, I read a piece, Anambra is ready for business, I think by Christian Aburime, the chief press secretary to the governor, saying that everybody should go out. And this morning, go and check. People are on the streets. So leadership also requires courage. And so while IPOB has reiterated his position, I think the major credit should go to Governor Chukwuma Soludo, who forced the issue and said, if you don't go to that market, there will be an issue. Last Monday, I reported that I saw stories saying he went to the market.
Yeah, he did.
To shop, to buy things, and all of that. So I think it's liberation moment for not just the people of Anambra State, in the Anambra, as they are called, and also the whole of the Southeast. The Agune Chamber, there is a group called Agune Chamber, which the governor deployed to provide security for the traders. And having seen that they will also be protected and secured, of course, they came out. Now, quickly. Now, I think the president and his wife receiving this international recognition is very good. And that's why we have been remarking it. Senator Remi Tinubu, Mrs. Tinubu, First Lady of Nigeria, was invited to the 74th National Breakfast Meeting in the United States, where she was specially recognized by President Donald Trump, who by reputation is very stingy with compliments. And then, of course, he said there that Mrs. Tinubu is a very well-respected woman and a church leader in Nigeria. Some mischievous persons have been saying, oh, he was saying that because Mrs. Tinubu is beautiful and classy. No, the serious part of it is that in itself, even if it is symbolic, had a very good effect. And it was a good moment for the administration in terms of soft power diplomacy. Now, President Tinubu is being invited to meet with the king, I think March 18, March 19. It's also a triumph of diplomacy, no matter how that was arrived at. In 37 years, the last person that visited the United Kingdom on a state visit was President Ibrahim Babangida. Before him, I think Shagari, and then Gawan, General Gawan. And now, this time around, it's the Tinubus being invited, on this diplomatic mission. I think, nobody can quarrel with that. Although, I imagine that very soon the opposition parties will come and say, President Tinubu should not go to the United Kingdom. He should stay at home. There has been just one accident in Kano. He should go there and move the corpses and physically repair the roads himself. These are two different categories. Why providing strong domestic policy traction is important. Foreign diplomacy is also important. We have seen economic diplomacy from President Tinubu. We have seen soft power diplomacy from him also. And then we have also seen him, trying to take charge as a chief foreign policy officer of the country. I think while there's a linkage between domestic policy and foreign policy, sometimes we tend to confuse both. We get lost in the translation and in understanding. As for Biafra, I think we discussed that last Friday, didn't we? Okay, the sit at home. Yeah, okay. Now, Kano, the accident.
Yeah, the accident.
FRSC Kano is saying that this is as a result of overspeeding.
That's right.
Now, it's not enough for FRSC Kano to say overspeeding. I thought that at the time, they said they were going to put speed limit, gauge on the roads. What has happened to that? And the people who are overspeeding, do we have the technology? Do we have the infrastructure to check them? If you drive on the streets of the United States, in Washington, D.C., or the state of Maryland, they will tell you 30, whatever per hour. If you violate it, you will get a ticket. Absolutely. If you get to where a school is, they will tell you, do 20 20 kilometers per hour. Americans respect all those injunctions. Now, we don't respect anything here, even when we say, oh, speed limits exist, because there's a reign of impunity in government and outside government. So I think the big issue is, how do you check this excessive speeding? That was how some athletes went to Ogun State National Sports Festival. And they got to Kano, and they had an accident, and they perished. The same excuse that FRC gave was overspeeding. In the Anthony Joshua case, we also had excessive speeding, they called it. Why do we have a body like FRC if they cannot address this issue?
Absolutely. All right. I believe that in Nigeria, unfortunately, we have a number of needless and preventable deaths, some of which, of course, happens through accidents, like we've had reported in Kano State, where 30 Nigerians have lost their lives reportedly. The casualties may be more, and we know that there's still some people receiving treatment, and this is extremely sad, especially because it's an issue that has been discussed for years and years. And like has already been said, we have a body that's supposed to oversee, aside from the sensitization and awareness outreaches that they do. There's a lot more that can be done, especially the employment of technology as a way to check the excesses of drivers on the motorway. In any country where rules don't exist, or where there's no way to enforce the rules that exist, you will find breaking of the law, very rampant. The reason why these highway codes or speed limits or speed checks work in other countries is because if you falter or if you break it, there are consequences. There's a penalty. The system is done in such a way that by your registration, number one is, first of all, even getting the license to be able to drive. There's a process to obtaining a license. Unfortunately, in Nigeria, that process is flawed and is marred by what has belabored a lot of areas in Nigeria, which is being able to check corruption and people being able to get it under the table. The other part is that beyond the process of obtaining a license is that there are regular checks on the state of your vehicle, on the state of the person that is driving. There are breathalyzers for those who might be on alcohol, who might be drunk. Unfortunately, that is also not enforced. So we have all these laws, we have all these highway codes in Nigeria, but the main challenge is the enforcement. Also, we use technology. Your plate number can be traced to the person whose name the number is registered or the vehicle is registered under. To what extent can we trace public vehicles? To what extent can we even trace private vehicles? And so people who are on the roads know that, or have a sense of belief, which is usually correct, that even when they flout these highway codes, nothing will be done to them. And as long as that continues, sadly, we'll continue to record these unnecessary and preventable deaths. We must put a premium on human life in Nigeria, and I believe that's one of the challenges that we have. Whether when it comes to announcements around kidnappings or massacres by terrorists or bandits, it's just a lack of shock value that would prompt us enough to take action on these matters. When the Anthony Joshua situation happened, that was international in the weight of its embarrassment, especially with regards to reckless driving and the lack of enforcement when it comes to road safety. That ought to have propelled us to begin to work. Unfortunately, I don't know to what extent lessons were learned, because just months down the line, we've now lost even more lives as a result of reckless driving. This is not an insurmountable challenge. It is the will to do it and the ability to be able to employ and actually let there be consequences when there are wrong actions. And this can be done through technology, like I mentioned, and other areas. Now, let me talk very quickly about the sit-at-home order. I find it quite almost as an affront that it would take the group IPOB to make a statement that, okay, everybody go back to work, after they've impoverished that region since 2021 for close to 5 years now. I wonder why the governors in the state have not been able to take decisive action, like Governor Soludo. We praise him now, but we also talked about the fact that it took him his second term to make a decision on this, or to come very tough. Having traders in the region lose 8 billion naira as reported every single Monday in one state. Put that across the 5 states where the sit-at-home order has has been enforced in the last 5 years and understand the true economic weight of what has been lost in this time. Abia State, where we have Aba, which is the commercial hub of the Southeast, which President Tinubu had promised during his campaign that he was going to make an international manufacturing hub, even comparing it to a place like Taiwan. How could we have done that when they were bleeding money out every single Monday as a result of the fact that the lives of the traders could not be guaranteed by the security operatives? So don't blame the people for sitting at home. A number of them would have loved to come out to work. A number of students who missed out on critical education days on Mondays. A number of people who were moving goods and people on Mondays lost out because there was the government failed them to actually provide security and provide, that safety for them. And so I'm glad, and it's great news to hear that it's finally, they are open for business now. But I think it's the sheer audacity for IPOB to be the one to determine whether or not the sit-at-home order should be out or not. The government should have taken its place with a monopoly on violence to ensure that people were able and enabled and had a conducive environment to go back to their stores. So I hope that beyond Anambra states, the other governors in Abia, Ebonyi, Enugu, and Imo State would also do well by their people to ensure that with the same show of solidarity and force and show of leadership that Governor Soludo has done in the last few weeks, they would also take a cue on that. And finally, we can see the end to this menace and actually begin to see economic activity return to the Southeast region and begin to see and tap into the full potential that the region has in this regard. Now, beyond that, I will go over to the Electoral Amendment Act. I'm glad that Nigerians have spoken out, whether it be from prominent Nigerians or even everyday people who, through their different platforms, have spoken out very strongly about the omission of the mandatory transmission of results electronically during the election. The Senate has said they're going to come and meet tomorrow. I think very critical, number one, is that may all the senators show up. Because we've talked about how some critical senators or some people who are there on the mandate of the people miss out on key debates and key issues like this. And so that's one thing, that they come out, they've been invited by the Senate president. Number two is that hopefully they will take away personal and political interest and put for once the interest of the Nigerian people at the fore of their decision making. Unfortunately, I'm not very optimistic, but I want to put some faith in the Senate to actually do right by the Nigerian people whom they represent. The clamor is loud. The voices of the people are loud. A lot of people, I've hardly heard, aside from the politicians, quarters where they have said, oh, let's not make it mandatory. The arguments have been made already. Those, the excuses that have been given have been broken down, have been defeated by a number of people technically that it is possible to actually transmit electronically. Some people have even cited the fact that we have POS operators in these areas and they're able to make transfers possible. So why is it impossible for us to be able to transmit results 1 or 2 weeks in a year during election season? It's also an indictment. Instead of the Senate to give excuses as to why this cannot work, should they not be finding solutions to ensure that we're able to shore up or beef up infrastructure to accommodate the transmission of results? This is 2026, for crying out loud. If we're going to compete favorably with the rest of the world, we have to get infrastructure, especially technology, right. And so for them to be able to come out and comfortably say that, oh, we cannot do this because we cannot transmit, if I say less than 1 MB of data in an area, that's an indictment on this government. And so I'm hoping that tomorrow when they have their meeting, it would actually be, finally show strength, leadership to the Nigerian people. Very finally and very quickly, to touch on the state visit, I'll make one point and I'll hopefully break it down more when, Adefemi comes during World Brief. And that is that, people might ask that, oh, why is this not happening in Buckingham Palace? Why Windsor Castle? The main part of that is that Buckingham Palace is undergoing major rehabilitation at this point, and so they have to move it to Windsor Castle. Windsor Castle also presents a more personal note to that visit, and so it's most welcome. But on this final note, I'll say, whilst the Tinubu administration might have gotten foreign policy at least on the right footing, it's important that the ovation might be loud outside, but the most important ovation and accolade and praise must be from the people that they actually govern here in Nigeria. They're the ones with the power of the vote, and so it's important that we have great perceptions abroad, but even more important that Nigerian people feel the impact of good government here in Nigeria.